What's up, guys? Today we're going to be making a classic bifold design with this beautiful shell Cordovan leather exterior. It's a natural color, has a great shine on it, and it's a very firm leather, so it's super easy to work with. I'm going to be using some white French linen thread and this beautiful Italian vegetable tanned leather, which will age absolutely wonderfully over time. So without further ado, let's get started. So for this beautiful exterior, I already pre-cut this piece, so we're not going to be trimming this or anything, but as you can see, this serves as a great basis for the rest of the wallet when I am lining up pieces to put together. We're going to start off with three very simple pieces for the template. We have the backing, we have the card slots, and then we have each of the wider slots that hold the card slots. So I'm going to take the vegetable tan leather. I'm just going to begin to cut out some rough pieces that I can later trim down for that interior. We'll start with the backing because that is the biggest piece, and then after that we'll go into the card slots, and then we'll take out those larger slots that the cards sit on top of. Now that we have everything cut out roughly, it's time to trim down each piece. So what I like to start by doing is taking the templates and lining it up on top of the rougher cut, and then using these solid weights to make sure that nothing shifts around and I can get a really clean edge when I'm trimming. For the larger pieces, I like to use an X-Acto knife just because I get a very precise cut with it. And then if I have any issues, any tearing, or any finicky pieces, I'll go through with a scything knife and I'll just take care of the leftovers without leaving anything by a thread. So now that all the pieces are finally cut out, I like to go through a burnishing process before I start putting the wallet together. It makes for a much cleaner look, and also it seals the outside from any elements and keeps the wallet looking good over time. So I'm going to go through a process of first sanding the outside to make sure that it's as neat as possible and that edge will take whatever I put on it. And after that, we're going to hit it with something called tokonole, which is a Japanese burnishing agent. We'll rub that on the edge, and then we'll just rub back and forth very quickly to get a nice shine on it. And typically I'll seal the edges at the end of that with beeswax or another wax depending on the type of leather. So I'm going to walk you through that process, and you can see we go over it about 3 to 4 times just to make sure that the nicest sheen on those edges is possible and that we're sealing it out from any elements, again, so this wallet can last the test of time. So now that we're done with the burnishing process, we can go ahead and put some decorative touches on the edges of the leather. Now I'm going to start by heating up the alcohol lamp and then using an edge creasing tool to mark the outsides of the wallet. Now this process has nothing to do with functional integrity or anything about that. This is all just for decorative touches, and it provides a very nice crisp and clean line that's really just a nice accent to the overall aesthetic of the wallet. Now, once everything has been creased and burnished, I'm going to show you exactly how the wallet's going to sit together. We're going to have our backing piece, our wider slots, our card slots on the front, and then all of that is going to get pieced together step by step, and then the wallet will be complete. So let's start off by going ahead and measuring out where the card slots are going to be placed. What I like to do is map everything out on graph paper first, and then I'll make some small marks before I glue anything together, just to ensure that none of those card slots are going to be slanted or out of place. Now that we've lined everything up, we've marked everything, it's time to glue all of the pieces together. Now this is quite a tedious process, and the drying time is about 10 minutes for each piece that you glue on. What I like to do is go in waves, and I'll do both sides of the card wallet, and then I'll take a break and then come back for each one. So I'm not going to show that whole process, but I will show you the basics of gluing and how I line everything up. Now I'm going to light the alcohol lamp again, and I'm going to do a slightly more functional edge creasing. For the parts that you don't see hidden beneath the front slots on the wallet, I do use an edge creaser that's a little bit wider than the one I showed before to mark these stitching lines, so I can get a very clean stitch, and so none of those will be out of place or sticking out erratically. Once that's done, I'll trim off the excess and make sure that the edge of the wallet is lined up perfectly for when I'm burnishing. Now that we have our lines creased, we'll go ahead and prick the holes right across the base of this card slot. Now this is important to do for each card slot, no matter how many there are, so that your cards don't fall through when you put them into the wallet. Next, I'll measure up my thread, wax it, and I'll thread the needles on so I can begin stitching. In this section, I'll be showing you how to saddle stitch using a stitching pony, which is the traditional method. The needles go on both sides and are passed through each of the slots made by the pricking iron, over and over until you get to the end of each row. You're going to repeat this for each of the card slots every time you glue, mark, and prick them. Once we're finished stitching on the top two slots, we'll glue the second ones on, trim them, sharpen our tools, mark again with the pricking irons, and then we'll go ahead and produce the same stitching pattern as we did before. It's important to do each one of these steps again for structural integrity of the wallet. After this, we'll be gluing on the front slots, which don't need to be stitched, because they'll be held on by glue and a thin layer of stitching on the overall outside of the wallet. Here, I'll be stitching the lazy way because it's quite a bit quicker to do it this way when you're going with small pieces and you're just looking to stitch on the fly. You can produce the exact same pattern, the same integrity, and everything else that you would with saddle stitching on a pony that you would saddle stitching with your bare hands. If you're just starting out or experimenting with different stitching styles, this is a great way to begin. What we'll do is we'll trim off the excess thread, finish up the back of the wallet, and then we'll go and we'll glue on those front slots. And for the front slots, we'll glue these, let them sit, and then we'll prepare the stitching marks for the inside of the wallet. And the reason we do that is we want to make sure that the card slots will all stay affixed on the sides, while we still have an open pocket where the client can store cash that's folded, cards, or anything else in those excess pockets. fire up our alcohol lamp again and get out our edge creasers for the stitching lines. Again, this is the wider edge creaser that's going to give us that clean line that we can mark our stitches on. Once this process is done, it's time to mark those holes. And then after that, we'll stitch, burnish, and we'll clean up the edge so the inside of the wallet will be ready to go. Once we're done with stitching, we'll use our smaller edge creaser for our decorative lines on the end, and then it's time to affix both of the inside panels to the backing for the wallet. Now, I like to mark these and then just use some clips to keep everything centered so nothing shifts while I glue each small piece individually. This process can be a bit tedious, so it's good to set aside a lot of time before you go in and begin this process. Once the wallet is dry, it's time to trim off any excess. This allows for a very clean line on the edge because this side will be exposed. It's extremely important to make sure that the inside of the wallet lines up with the exterior for a clean and crisp look. Now, we'll go ahead and just like we did with the inside slots, we'll mark our stitching lines. After that, we'll stitch. And then at the top here, we're going to make sure that we get a very clean, very solid burnishing on it because the top of the wallet is one of the most often seen parts. Once we're done with our stitching line, we'll go ahead and stitch the final piece of the interior of the wallet. This line across the top is not only decorative, it also helps to keep the top slots from coming undone or bending out in any way from the glue. This is very important and one of the first things that your client will see when they open up the wallet. So it's incredibly important to take your time, and you can see here that I'm using the less traditional method for stitching, just because I know for myself I get the absolute cleanest lines with this process. Once done, we'll be ready to burnish the top and get this all sorted out and glued to that beautiful shell Cordovan backing. So just as I've showed a couple times, the gluing process is very simple and straightforward. I went ahead and skipped that for gluing the interior to the back of the wallet because it's a bit more tedious. So at this point, we have the interior glued to the exterior, and we're marking the stitching lines, not the decorative ones, before we begin to prick and then stitch the outside of the wallet. This is one of the final steps, and I like to take my time as much as possible here to make sure everything's lined up correctly. Again, what we'll do is we'll wax, thread the needles, and then begin stitching the outside together. Now, just for consistency's sake, because the wallet is a little bit heavier, it's a little bit sturdier at this point, I like to use the saddle stitching method with the stitching clamp when I'm doing the exterior of a bulkier wallet like this. As you can see, we have all the holes ready to be stitched through, and I'm going to show you a very, very short clip of me stitching it together, and then it's on to the final burnishing process, which I'll walk you through as well. With all of the stitching complete and the edges ready to be burnished and finished, we're going to open up our trusty edge sealant, and we're going to go for a few passes on the edges. Now again, what I like to do first is sand out the edges before I put anything on it to seal it. And I'm going to show you the lengthy process of finishing up the exterior on a full bifold. I'll do about 3 to 4 different sets of burnishing for each edge. Now the reason I do this is because the interior doesn't get a lot of wear and tear, but the outside does. And I want to make sure that this sheen lasts the test of time. So you'll see that I'm going over this quite tediously, and I'll make sure that if there's any parts that aren't burnished evenly, or the color's not the same, that I go over them individually before I move on to another edge. In between each burnishing, I like to leave about 2 to 3 minutes just to make sure that the edge is fully dry so there's no warping or creasing that goes on the outside. In the final step, I use a very thin layer of beeswax so I don't get rid of that sheen too much, and I just keep a nice sealant, and then I'll burnish very lightly to finish off the outside of the wallet. Putting the finishing touches on, we'll light up the alcohol lamp again and use the smaller edge creaser for our decorative lines that will go around the exterior of the wallet and tie directly into the top of the wallet. Now that we're finally finished, we can brush off the wallet, make sure everything's clean and clear and ready to go, and admire our final product. Alright guys, now we have the finished product. I'm going to walk you through some of the details and show you what we have. So we have 6 card slots total, 3 on each side, with 2 hidden slots in the center, and an oversized bill slot. As you can see, that white stitching is a very nice contrast to the subtle tan on the interior and exterior, and the edges have a very nice shine to them after burnishing. And last but not least, taking a look at this shell Cordovan exterior, we can see the detailed lines and the contrast stitching. Thank you so much for watching this process and being a part of it, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.